إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه. To give you, to start with where we are now, to give you a glimpse of the world according to GAP, and this is the world according to me, not GAP. We, I believe, are standing at a crossroads in history. And a crossroads in history is a time of great instability. It's a time that is characterized by a lot of turmoil, a lot of unrest, for various reasons. Sometimes it is wars, sometimes it is political unrest, sometimes it is epidemics, sometimes it is natural disasters. But it is thanks to that unrest, the khair in that unrest is that it shakes the foundations of the structures of society. And people for a short time are willing to listen to things that they would not have listened to or wouldn't have entertained before that. And therefore, for a short time, it is given into the hands of a single man or woman or a small group of men or women to change the path of destiny. And I believe that we today are living at such a time. And therefore, it's critically important for us to have what we know as perspective. Now, what is perspective? If you get lost in a desert, then to find direction, you need to climb some high place, find a rock or find a tree or some such thing. And when you climb that high place and you look, you are able to see your destination. That I have to get to that road over there, or I have to get to whatever it is, some water or whatever. So when you are on top of that tree, you are doing simultaneously two things. You know where you are standing and you know where you need to go. So perspective is the ability to hold in your mind simultaneously two pictures. Where I am now and where I need to go. And if you look at this in the context of the Quran and Sunnah, that is exactly the meaning of the focus on Akhirah. Where I am now and where I need to go. A Muslim is a person who has perspective, by definition because of his or her faith. And that's why I always invite people as think about your religion. Don't just follow blindly and live Islam as like robots. No, think about this. Perspective, the things that we teach in the top leadership colleges of the world are things that we know from our deen for centuries, except that we are not aware of what we know. So therefore, to apply effort, you need to know the right direction. The nature of the world has changed today, and I'm talking about the corporate world. This is a world of knowledge workers. It's not a world that so much of manufacturing organizations. The role has shifted. If we take from 1914 onwards, say the Industrial Revolution time, sometime when we have more time I will talk in greater detail, but I don't want to go on too long today. The world focus shifted from agricultural, agrarian societies through the Industrial Revolution to an industrialized, meaning mainly manufacturing-based society, to a society which we are living in today, which we call a knowledge society. Now, what are the typical things about a knowledge society? And the first thing is that there's a huge increase in the number of technology workers. BPOs, business process outsourcing, has become a very major source of revenue for countries which are doing it, and a very great source of revenue also for the people, for the countries who are outsourcing it. Even though politically business process outsourcing has caused some amount of unrest with the constituencies of countries which are outsourcing businesses, but that doesn't stop organizations from outsourcing them simply because of the economy of scale and simply because of the potential to make profit. Now, how is a technology worker different from a manual worker? One is professional education is required, and therefore computer mechanics are called IT professionals. Sorry to say that. I teach them. I am on the boards of various companies of computer mechanics, and we make a lot of money. But effectively, it's like fixing the cycle which has gone wrong. Higher expectations and demands from people, higher cost and spending potential. Now, that is a very important element in terms of the economy. What the average factory worker could buy, the average BPO employee or the average IT organization employee can buy much more. And this is also aided by changes in the manner in which credit has become available today across the world. And of course, most of those means of credit are not Islamically correct, but those are realities of life. And therefore, these people are also key influencers in society, and that is one of the major reasons is that they have access to technology, especially with regard to enormous data storages, and I'll give you some figures in a minute, enormous data storages, extremely fast search engines, and very, very fast communication across the world. And that's something that has a lot of implications, which are economic, which are in terms of social engineering, which are in terms of political stability, and so on and so forth. The society itself is changing. Europe has an aging population, changes in employment and spending patterns. Obviously, when people are retiring and so on, they are not buying the same things that they were buying when they were young people setting up home. Knowledge societies are created across the world, and some of the elements of a knowledge society, two very important elements. One is that knowledge is easily acquired and it is boundaryless. And therefore, the boundaries, entry barriers to businesses and so on have been lowered and continue to be lowered. It's easier and easier to get into business and easier to reach potential customer populations. For example, in the past, if you wanted to reach a huge customer base, customer populations, companies like Unilever, for example, were known in the countries in terms of the spread of their products, in terms of how many outlets they had, and so on and so forth. Whereas today, to reach, and I'll give you some figures of what that reach is, to reach populations, all you need is one laptop computer with an internet connection. Global competition. The nature of competition has changed, and we look at that in a little more detail on my next slide. But global competition also has meant that it has created challenges for both business as well as governments. Competition from across the world, countries you never heard of, also countries that you have heard of, have created situations where there are major challenges with regard to people in the areas of business, in the area of political influence, and so on and so forth. Nature of competition has changed from local companies with foreign branches to global companies organized along product lines. General Electric is a classic example of that. GE is not an American company. GE is a global international company which is represented in more than 130 countries across the world. Many other companies like this. So the nature of the cooperation has changed. Strategic alliances, divided loyalty of locals. For example, I remember the first research center for GE, the GE Research Center used to be and still continues to be the main center in Schenectady in upstate New York. It was for the first time moved out of America to Bangalore in India. And it was set up there as Jackwell Center for Research. And I was teaching a course there, a leadership course for the top management of that institute. And I noticed that all the furniture in the place was imported from Malaysia. Everything, every nail, all the chairs and tables and everything else, including when in the interval, when I went to the place where we go to in intervals, I saw that all the equipment there was also imported from Malaysia. So I asked the head of the organization, who was an Indian, I told him that every single one of these things which you have bought is available in India at the same quality at a lower price, and obviously you're not paying any transportation, so that is not there. So I said, why don't you support local industries instead of importing the stuff from Malaysia? He said, that is our global policy. That's it. So now, is the guy an Indian or is he, we don't know what he is, right? So local loyalties are also divided, and that's one of the reasons why my book on family business, for example, many of you have read that book. Those of you who haven't read that book, you don't know what you're missing, go buy it. Seriously, the focus that I have made on SMMEs, small and medium enterprises, is because of this very reason. Small and medium enterprises don't import furniture from Malaysia. They will buy local. And that's how small and medium enterprises support local economies, and they create local jobs and so on, which the global companies don't do all of that. So that is something which is important. Political considerations and influence is another major one that in terms of what happens and how global corporations run governments. I don't think I need I need to elaborate that to you, that global political policy is run by multinational corporations, not by politicians. And that's something which is important to understand, right? And it's nothing new. The British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company ran governments. Robert Clive was British East India Company country manager, but he fought wars. He annexed independent countries in India, independent states. He deposed and killed monarchs, and he enslaved populations, and he was a manager of a company, period. So this is nothing new. It's just that we, because we don't read history, we have no perspective on what's happening in the world, and that's the important reason why we should read history. The state of the marketplace, let me tell you about that. Very important to keep one foundational rule in mind, which is that what happens does not depend on where it happens. What happens does not depend on where it happens. For example, the WTO, I don't know, among all my professional friends here, how many of you have actually read the WTO document? Can I see some hands? How many of you have no clue what I'm talking about? A lot more hands coming up there. Alhamdulillah. Well, I can't explain the WTO to you just now. Effectively, what the WTO means, one of the things it means, it says that we now have a level playing field. Effectively, what it means is that now the mouse is free to fight the elephant, and nobody must interfere, right? And then we say, well, you see, this is freedom. We're giving the mouse every right to fight the elephant, and nobody will interfere. But you know and I know what will happen every single time the mouse fights the elephant. As simple as that, right? So think about that. Now, how has the state of the marketplace, how has it changed? In what ways has it changed? Number one, quality is no longer a selling factor. Please understand this very clearly. Quality is a basic requirement of business. It's not something unique. You say, well, I am making a high quality product. It's a big deal. So is everybody else. Second thing is that technology and process information is no longer exclusive. As I told you, the nature of knowledge is that boundaries fall apart, fall away. And therefore, the nature of technology and the nature of information or process information is no longer exclusive. Third one is that we have an educated customer who has choices. And there was a time when Indian Airlines, I was traveling once on Indian Airlines from Bombay to Hyderabad, and one of my professors from my business school where I did my MBA, he was sitting with me. And Indian Airlines, somebody inspired them to serve lime juice. So the stewardess came with lime juice. So my professor was there. He said, "Can I have something else?" So she said, "Sir, but we only have lime juice." So he said, "You mean I have no choice?" So I told him, "Sir, you got a choice. You want it or you don't want it." Now that is no longer the case. People have choices. People express their loyalty to your products by means of walking. They go away. People run customer service questionnaires and they say, well, we have 5% complaints, which means 95% of people are happy with us. It doesn't mean that. It means that 95% of people went somewhere else. The only 5% who stayed there are complaining. Most people can't be bothered to complain. Change in the sensitivity of work delivery is what gave birth to the business process outsourcing industry. There was always a time difference between America and India from the time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created America and India. There's nothing new. The time difference is not new. What happened with the time difference is new. How people leverage that time difference is new. I'm always amazed why South Africa missed that bandwagon, because you have a country here which speaks English reasonably well, even though you have an accent and you say various things in various ways. And God help those who come from, who have to go and work and listen to people from Cape Town. That's a completely different language altogether. But most South Africans speak English reasonably well. How come you missed the bus with regard to the outsourcing industry? But it's a huge industry, major potential to create employment. But somehow, maybe it's not too late, Allah knows best. But China is way ahead of everyone, including India in that particular case. And that's the final point on this is distinct changes in both flow of work and location of decision making. Decisions for global corporations are usually made in their headquarters, which are usually in the West, except for Japanese corporations where they are in the East. And other than that, but those decisions affect people across the world, irrespective of where you are, what you are. And that's why I'm saying what happens does not depend on where it happens. Global trade policies. I'll give you one very simple example. The European Union decided to bring in legislation in 1995 to say that leather curing must only be done using products from certain companies. And of course, coincidentally, I'm sure nobody did that deliberately, but those companies all happen to be German. And their products were 3 or 4 times or 5 times the price of the products that people were using, the leather tanning industry was using until then. Now, what was the outcome of that? The outcome of that was that a very successful, highly vibrant leather tanning and leather garment industry in India got almost completely wiped out. Very few people survived because the cost of processing the leather completely wiped out their margins. Now, decision which is taken in the European Union is affecting and wiping out an industry 10,000 miles away in India, which is not connected directly with Europe. The nature of competition has changed. There's no hiding place. There's no protection for niches. If you have a niche product which you believe that nobody else in the world has and only you have, believe me, there are only 2 reasons why a niche exists. One is you are selling something which is so lousy that nobody wants it. Or second one is that you are so small that nobody cares. But the minute you get to a point where you are selling or providing a service or product which is really useful, believe me, people will come in there. Pepsi Foods came into India in 1991 on a 7-year expense budget. You know what 7-year expense budget means? You've got enough accountants and corporate people here to know what an expense budget means. Right? There's no questions asked. They don't have to account for any profit. Just spend money to penetrate the market. One of the things they did was that the whole market for bhujia, which is different from bhajia. Bhujia is what we know as sew. The Indians will understand that. The others, again, you don't know what you're missing. In Rajasthan, it used to be a cottage industry completely manned by women. How can something be manned by women? Women by women. And it was a cottage industry. The beauty was if you drove in Rajasthan, if you went for a drive, almost every 100 kilometers you ate bhujia which you got from the local tea shops, and it had a different flavor because it had a flavor from that particular village. Recipes handed down generation to generation. By 95 or so, and now if you drive in Rajasthan, you get what is called Bikaneri bhujia, which does not come from Bikaner. It comes from a very shiny Pepsi factory, untouched by human hand, in plastic packs, nitrogen packed, in strips. Everywhere it is the same thing. The entire cottage industry got wiped out, which means that millions of women overnight were jobless. And these were women, of course. What does the theory tell us? What does management theory tell us? It tells us that, of course, they can be re-employed and redeployed. How do you re-employ and redeploy a Rajasthani woman who has no education, zero skills, zero anything? She was living by her means which she was trying to do something, supporting her house, and that means has been wiped out. That is what is happening with regard to competition coming. My wife buys usually, I like honey, so my wife buys honey from our local food store, which is called Hallelujah Honey, which comes from Argentina. Now, I don't know, maybe you go to heaven if you eat it because it's called Hallelujah Honey. But it comes from Argentina. Now, I've never been to Argentina, so I haven't checked the shelves of the food shops there to see whether Indian honey is selling there. But I can probably bet you that it is not selling there. Right? No niches. Second one, attitudes of managers have changed. I'll tell you an amusing story. This was reported in the US when I used to live there in 2000, just before 2097, 98. And this story is a very interesting story of about Masaru Ibuka, the chairman of Sony at that time. When I say Sony, what comes to mind? Walkman, right? Sony Walkman, most famous product. The story is that Masaru Ibuka went for a meeting to Switzerland. On the way to the meeting, he bought a Philips dictaphone, and in the meeting, he dictated whatever notes he wanted. That night, he was free, so he went to a nightclub, and he listened to a song there. Now, I strongly do not recommend you do such things, but Masaru Ibuka did that. So he listened to the song, he liked the song very much, so he recorded it on his dictaphone. And next day, when he was going back on his flight, he listened to that song on the flight. Now, is that a remarkable story? No. But you know why it's remarkable? Because that was the founding of the Sony Walkman. That was the idea of the Sony Walkman. But you know, that is not the bottom line of my story. The bottom line of my story is that Philips still makes dictaphones. So also, if you take Kodak, for example, Kodak is the company which invented digital photography. Kodak invented digital photography. And Kodak last year went out of business. Why? Because of digital photography. Can you believe that? Kodak went down the drain because they didn't take advantage of their own invention, what they invented. Customers' demand does not change over time. Customers' demand is always the same, twice the quality at half the cost at half the time. 2Q plus half C plus half T. Over and over and over, and that does not change over time. That's the same thing over and over again. Therefore, there are lots of examples of that, of what do you need to do if you want to remain in business. How will you continue to decrease cost? How will you continue to improve your turnaround time? And how will you continue to improve quality without enhancing cost? And that those big challenges. There's a beautiful example of the South Korean garment industry, what they did, which I will not tell you. The message for us, therefore, is the only thing that counts is the quality of people. People who are highly focused on creating value. People who are highly focused on creating quality processes in every aspect of the organization and developing leaders. And that's why the famous saying, which I like very much, they say there's no favorable wind, there are only good sailors. Now, critical challenges, therefore, before us are three, which is the management of change, which comes from having an entrepreneurial approach. Each one of us needs to say the buck stops here, I will not pass the buck to somebody else. Minimization of bureaucracy, meaning that speed is the key, speed of response is the key. Slowness is a sign of impending death. And the last one is leveraging technology to eliminate non-value added work. But then as the saying goes, when opportunity knocks, some people complain about the noise. Tomorrow's corporations, therefore, are things that will go from command and control bureaucracies to self-managed teams. And this is the result of a wonderful survey that was done, a CEO survey that was done by Korn Ferry International at the turn of the century. And they asked a lot of CEOs, what will it take to succeed in the world of tomorrow? And this is what they were told. They said that companies will move from command and control bureaucracies to self-managed teams, which means that the ability to inspire people, the ability to build teams will be absolutely critical to success. 61% of respondents believe that corporations will be managed by a top management team and not by one individual. This happens already in most corporations. They have a CEO, but effectively the company is managed by a team of people, not by one person. And we have this, the most beautiful example of this is the Majlis Shura, which is our Islamic system of how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his whole style of leadership had to do with taking mashwara from people. And the third one was that decision-making responsibility and accountability will be spread throughout the organization. You can't pass the buck upwards. If you have been given a responsibility, then you carry out that responsibility in terms of developing leaders, and we'll see from the life of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam how this was done. Very important that cross-cultural exposure will be critical to success. How well do we understand other cultures? How appreciative are we of other cultures? How much do we understand how other cultures work? This kind of tunnel vision that we have, where we only look at people like ourselves, we only hear and understand people like ourselves, is very detrimental. That does not work. Therefore, the question that I want to leave with you is this: what are you doing today in terms of your corporations and in terms of individual careers as well as companies? What are you doing today that differentiates you from others? And how does this affect your visibility and credibility? I do a whole workshop on this. I'm just giving you a glimpse of this. Very, very critically important. There are a zillion people like you in the world. If you say, well, I am an engineer, well, they are like, India alone produces 300,000 of them every year. So you are one of 300,000 from India alone, so big deal. Similarly, anything else. Now, how do you stand out? Because that's why I say leaders stand out, sheep blend in, and you need to decide whether you are a sheep or not a sheep. Let me give you another quick one on this. I told you I'll give you some data. Sony brought out a very interesting presentation in end of 2010, which was also on YouTube. It says that if you are 1 in a million in India, then there are 1,200 like you. China, and they put the number on 2014, they said in 2014 China will become the #1 English-speaking country in the world. And that's the reason I asked you, how come you missed the bus? Because why is speaking English important? Because English is the global language of business, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you English, but I don't know how come you don't use that. You don't leverage that. You don't leverage English either here or in the area of deen, because you are the only country that I know which has the capability of producing world-class ulama who can speak English, and there's a crying need of that in the world. Islam is the only religion which is taught by non-Muslims in global universities. Please understand this very clearly. Islam is the only religion which is taught by people who do not practice Islam, who are not Muslims, in global universities, and people like yourselves in this country who can change that situation, who can produce ulama, who can teach Islam. You don't seem to do that. You are very happy eating curry khichdi, and I love the stuff. They always feed it to me anytime I come here. China's biggest asset is not people, it is not money, it is not intelligence. It's discipline. And that is something that it's our biggest asset that we don't have it. Did you know that the top 10 in-demand jobs in 2010 did not even exist in 2004? They were not in demand, they didn't exist. Our challenge, therefore, is to solve problems that we don't even know as problems yet. I am old enough to remember a time when we saw the first plastic bottle, and we thought that this came down from Jannah, because we thought this is such a beautiful and wonderful thing. Plastic, the thing doesn't break. Now, how beautiful is that? And we know now the reality of plastics, right? What are the problems today that we are creating, but we see them as great solutions? Because today's great idea can become tomorrow's problem, and that's something very important for us to keep in mind. Our biggest need, therefore, is imagination. But our schools destroy it in the child as quickly as possible. And they're very highly successful. Very successful. Who is your star pupil in school? Whether it's a Darul Uloom or whether it is a contemporary education school. A person who intakes information, keeps it safe, and regurgitates it on the question, on the answer paper without processing. That is your star pupil. If the person takes the courage or makes the mistake of processing that information or of asking any questions, then that person is labeled as a troublemaker, and if he gives too much trouble, he is thrown out. And then, of course, he goes on to produce, to set up companies like Apple and Microsoft, right? If Steve Jobs had been a star pupil, maybe he would have been working for a salary for some IT company. He would not have set up Apple. Because our system rewards compliance and punishes originality. This is the tragedy of our system. And really, seriously, we have to look at how do we educate and what do we call education. My question is, what do you do with imagination in your company, in your school, in your organization, in your Darul Uloom or whatever? What do you do with imagination there? And if you say that you do not kill imagination, what is your metric? What metric is not your class? I'm talking about the measurement, right? How do you know? Now, Sheikh Google, the Sheikh with the biggest number of murideen in the world, right? There were 31 billion searches on Google every month in 2009. In 2006, this number was 2.7 billion, a factor of about 14. Why? Because when people know that they can get answers, they will ask the questions. So to whom were these questions addressed before Google? That's why I said now instead of saying AD, BC and so on, you said BG, before Google. Now look at spread and penetration. I'm talking to you about how information spreads and what happens with it. First commercial text message, SMS, was sent in 1992. In 2009, the total number of text messages was more than 5 billion, more than the population of the world, and this has been increasing exponentially. I don't know, maybe there are some people sitting right here texting. We know that people, may Allah forgive us, I've even known of ulama who are sitting in masajid and tweeting and saying this is what is happening in the masjid. Like use of technology in the wrong place. Years that it took to reach an audience of 50 million. Radio took 38 years. TV took 13 years. Internet 4 years. iPod 3 years. Facebook 2 years. 50 million. Being allergic to technology is being allergic to success. Simple as that. Number of internet devices, 1984, 1000, 2008. Try and read that number. That's 1 billion if you don't know, just count the number of zeros, right? Now let's look at how information and teaching is changing. Total amount of technical information is doubling every 2 years, which means that if a student is in a 4-year engineering course, what he learned in year 1 is already outdated in year 3. I'm not saying it's redundant, but it's outdated. NTT Japan successfully tested a fiber optic cable that can send 14 trillion bits per second down a single strand of fiber. That is 2,660 CDs or 210 million calls per second. You know, the issue of Iman bil Ghaib becomes very different looking at the world today, because if you say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can hear and understand and knows what's going on, NTT can do that, AT&T can do that. So what's so difficult to believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do it? Right? Can you imagine if I told you that I've got this person who can simultaneously connect people speaking in every language on the globe simultaneously and record every single one of those conversations and know what was being said, can monitor, can pick out a single word and trace that person to the place from which they are making this call. If I told you, would say, Subhanallah, this must be Allah. It's not Allah, it's AT&T. Simple as that. It's Vodacom. It's any telephone company in the world. So what must be the glory of Allah? Think about that. What must be the glory of Allah? Ajib, I mean, we don't think. You're working in technology, think about that. This is the technology of, one small human being which comes out of nowhere, and that human being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given his brain the power to be able to do all of this. What is the creator of that brain like? And that is currently tripling every 6 months. Now again, Sony is saying this, but my take on this is that won't last for too long, because new technology will come which will replace that. Jazakumullahu khairan. See, that's why bring up children with deen and they do things without asking. May Allah bless you, inshallah. I've got a liquid relationship, mashallah. You've got a solid liquid relationship. Now, so what does all this mean? I mean, I am not giving you random bits of information. Let's tie it all up together and see what it means, and then see how does the Sunnah help us in all of this. Number one, essence of it all is easier and easier access to information, huge enhanced computing power, huge information storages. This one computer of mine can store it has a hard disk which is 750 gig, which means that probably every book that was ever written in the world can be stored on this one machine. So huge information storages, hugely fast searches. One of the benefits of these searches is that if you know, for example, if you are looking for, and I do this all the time when I'm writing khutbahs and so on, I just know one word in one ayah. I type in the word, I get the ayah. I don't even know the word in the ayah, I know a kind of meaning of what I want to get, and I want to search in the Quran for this, and I just put in the meaning there and I get that ayah. I get the hadiths related to that with all references. Huge searches, and of course this applies to everything. What does it mean? It means that this gives us the potential to forecast scenarios, prepare for eventualities, and predict outcomes. My question to you is, given all of this, who is doing a scenario-based strategy plan for the Muslims of South Africa? I'm talking about the whole country. Do you have a written down? I know you have the 2020 vision document of who did that? Minara, not Minara. Al-Ansar, no. Samnet. Okay, somebody did it. But that's just one document. I'm talking about at a national level. Do you have a strategic plan for this ummah? Do we have a strategic plan for Muslims globally? And if we don't have it, believe me, technology is not the reason. We have the technology to be able to do it. We just don't have the vision. We don't want to think. We don't have the industry. We don't want to make the effort. We don't want to take the pain. Somebody asked Helen Keller, who was blind, as you know, somebody asked her, what is worse than being blind? She said, to have sight and no vision. So ask yourself, very simple self-test, ask yourself, how many books a month do I read? How many of you read more than one book a month? How many read more than 2 books a month? How many read 3 books a month? How many read 3 books a month and write a book? Not impossible, eminently doable. How many papers do you publish annually? In your areas of expertise, how many of you write? And how many of you publish papers annually? How many of you are invited to speak at international conferences across the world? What opportunities and problems do you foresee? What are your solutions? I'm not talking about drawing room conversations. I'm talking about actual solutions for problems that you have foreseen and which you are thinking of solutions. Operative questions: what are our criteria for judgment? What values will drive our decisions? What is the cost of change and what is the cost of not changing? What are the demands for the new generation? I was speaking at to a gathering of ladies this morning, and I asked them a question. Let me ask you that question. There was a 17-year-old, his name was Muhammad bin Qasim. At the age of 17, he was commanding an army, and the army went all the way to Sindh, all the way to India, to the Indus River. My question to you is, what is in the mind of your 17-year-old? Manchester United? Why? Do you think they just handed Muhammad bin Qasim the key to the army and made him commander-in-chief just like that on his 17th birthday as a gift? Cut your cake and the army pops out? Or did somebody prepare him? Think about that, right? Think about that. And that brings us to the formula that I have, the concept that I talk about and which I am in the process of writing. This book will be published shortly, inshallah. I call it the gear principle. Now, why is gear important? Because you can have the most powerful engine in the world, but unless the gear engages, the power of the engine will never be transmitted to the wheels. So your vehicle, your engine will race, but the car will not move because the gear is not engaged. So gears are important. Gear is the most critical thing to locomotion, to going forward. Gear means, it's an acronym for 4 things: generate energy, energize others, achieve objectives, and gain a return. And we'll look at this in the context of the Sunnah. So generate energy, energize others, achieve results, and get a return. Now, generate energy is the energy of the vision. It's the ability to generate, get people energized. It is the ability to create a vision that people can see. The chief challenge of the leader is, how can I make you dream my dream? How can I transfer what is in my heart into your hearts? How can I transfer what I am seeing so that you can see it as well? That was the vision. That is the power of the vision, is not what you can see, but what you can make others see. And that's my quote number 63. The power of the vision is not what you see, but what you can make others see. Strategy is the ability to get to that vision. How will we achieve this vision? And the roadmap is the milestones on that strategy. Rasulullah ﷺ changed the lives of people. And one way in which he changed the lives of people is that he changed the meaning of the word high net worth individual. Today, if I ask you, and I've got enough of my corporate friends here, if I tell you, if I say so-and-so is a high net worth individual, what am I talking about? High net worth individual means what? Somebody who has money, right? Do you call somebody, when you're saying high net worth individual, are you thinking this is the person who has the greatest amount of knowledge? Yes? No? No. Are you saying the high net worth individual is the person who is the most pious? Are you saying a high net worth individual is the person who is most compassionate? Are you saying high net worth individual is the person who is most connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No. High net worth individual in today's language only means one thing, which is somebody who has a lot of money. Now, interestingly, that was exactly the definition at the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They didn't use that terminology, but that's what they meant. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's message changed the meaning of high net worth individual from Abu Lahab to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. The meaning of net worth got changed. The meaning of net worth got changed. You don't judge a person by the amount of money he has in his pocket. You judge a person based on the character of that individual. Who was this person? What was he doing? How was this person perceived in society? How was he or she beneficial to society? Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave the Sahaba a purpose for their life. And that purpose was meaningful enough for them to change their entire lives. And that's why I say commitment is a line that you must cross. between wanting and doing. Now what was this purpose that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave them? Ka'b bin Malik radiallahu anhu narrates about the Baytul Aqaba. He said that 70 something of us came from Medina, and we came with the intention of meeting Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and swearing allegiance to him and inviting him to come to Medina. And the deal was that they were supposed to meet him after Hajj in the Ayyamut Tashriq in Mina. So he said we came, we gathered that night, and we came to the room, to that place in Al-Aqaba in ones and twos, so that we would not be detected by the Quraysh. And he said that when we were all gathered there, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam came, and Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib was with him. And first Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib radiallahu anhu, at that time he was not a Muslim, he spoke and he said, "O people of Yathrib, Muhammad is our son and he is safe in our city of Makkah. You are inviting him to come to your place and to live with you." He said, "Remember that every sword in Arabia will be turned against you if Muhammad comes to live with you. Now if you are able to protect him and if you are able to support him, then take him, otherwise leave him where he is, because he is safe." Ka'b bin Malik radiallahu anhu said that our leader stood up and he said, "Ya Rasulullah, please speak to us. Tell us, what do you want from us?" I am talking about the ability to energize. See this ability of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, "Tell us, what do you want from us?" And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a statement. I want you to seriously look into your hearts and ask yourself this question. If Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was alive here today, and if he made that statement, how many of us would stand here and how many of us would run for cover? Because that is the standard. The Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajmain are the golden standard. Believe me, we are all going to be compared against them. They will not be compared to us. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood up and he said, "I want you to promise that you will protect me like you protect your own wives and children." He's talking about protecting the dawah of Islam. He's not saying that because he's afraid. He said, "I want you to protect me like you protect your wives and children," meaning that if it is necessary for you to sacrifice your life, if it is necessary for you to take the bullet, you will take the bullet. Second thing he said to them was that I want you to promise me that when I ask, you will give in times of plenty and in times of need. Whether you have it or not. If I ask you for resources, for money, for whatever it is to support the work of Islam, that you will give it whether or not you have it with you at the time. And the third thing he said to them was that I want you to promise that you will obey me, whether you understand what I am saying or not, or whether you like what I am saying or not. You will obey me if you like it, you will obey me if you dislike it. You will obey me if you understand why I am saying something, and you will obey me even if you don't understand what I am saying. Complete and total unquestioning obedience to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before I tell you the response of the Sahaba, let me ask you to ask this question to yourself. If Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was standing here and asking this question to you, how many of us here are there in this room who will say, "Ya Rasulullah, we will obey you"? The Sahaba said, Ridwanullahi alayhim ajmain. The leader, Ka'b bin Malik radiallahu anhu, he said, our leader asked, he said, "Ya Rasulullah, what will we get for this?" And Ka'b bin Malik radiallahu anhu said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied with one word. He said, "Jannah." He said, "Jannah." And he said, spontaneously, all of us said, "Subhanallah, what a bargain." They said, "What a bargain." Can you understand this? Does it make sense? I am supposed to give up my life, my wealth, complete unconditional obedience, and you are promising me a pie in the sky? Jannah, for which I have to die first? So who had the perspective on reality, them or us? That's why this morning I asked this question. Whenever I ask this question, I'm not asking you, believe me, I'm asking myself. And that question was, how real is Jannah to you? It's as simple as that. How real is Jannah to you? The ability to energize people. What was this ability in Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that he was able to inspire that level of energy, that level of commitment in people who he was seeing for the first time? First meeting, first time, and all of them are ready to sacrifice themselves and to give their money and to do whatever it takes to please him, and he promises them Jannah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open our hearts to the message of Islam, because the message has not changed. It is the same message, the same Rabb, the same Nabi. What has changed is us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change us back to the level of the first generation and to open our hearts so that we can also stand up and do what needs to be done, inshallah. Second part of gear out of 4 is the ability to energize. How do you energize? How do you build a team? How do you gain commitment? How do you leverage conflict? Leverage conflict, not avoid conflict. Conflict is a huge source of binding hearts. Conflict is a very, very good thing. Conflict is a huge source of drilling deep to arrive at deeper and more meaningful solutions. But then we have to know how to handle conflict. The adabul ikhtilaf. If conflict only results in a lot of heat and no light, that conflict will burn and destroy. So we have to understand how we can deal with conflict in a positive manner. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam communicated with people according to the need of the individual. He didn't give the same message to everybody in the same way. Different people, he treated them differently according to what was their need and what would make meaning to them. He never got angry with bad behavior, especially if it was directed at him personally. His anger was only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and when Islam was attacked. And he developed leadership especially among the youngsters. Khalid bin Walid and Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhum. He made Khalid bin Walid the commander-in-chief of the army when there were people there, Abu Bakr and Omar and others radiallahu anhum, who were his seniors, who were capable. But Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam made Khalid bin Walid the commander-in-chief of the army. Why? Because he recognized the talent of Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu. And he made him the commander-in-chief of the army and he gave him a title. What was the title of Khalid bin Walid? Saifullah. And Ajib, this is an aside, but I was reading the life of Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu, and the writer says that the last moments of his life, he was dying, he was lying on his bed and he was dying and he was very upset. He was very upset. And a friend of his came and sat with him, and Khalid bin Walid said to his friend, "Tell me, why am I dying like this? Why am I dying like a camel in his stable? Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not give me shahada?" He says, "There is not a piece on my body from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet which has not received a wound in the service of Islam. But I did not die a shaheed, and I am dying now here in my bed." And his story also illustrates the benefit of having good friends, friends who have knowledge. The friend said to him, do not be upset. He said, "Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you the darajat." He said, "You did not die a shaheed because your fate was sealed the day Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave you the title Saifullah." He said, "Because how can the Saif of Allah fall in battle?" He said, "How can the sword of Allah fall in battle?" He said, "The day Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam called you Saifullah, that day your fate was written, that you were not going to die on the battlefield." So he said, "Allah will give you darajat." Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu as the commander of the army. Last action that he took before he passed away was the appointment of Usama bin Zayd, and he said, "Send him out." Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu his Khalifa. He said about Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had kept nubuwwat going, then Umar would be the Nabi after me radiallahu anhu. He prepared leadership. to illustrate just one incident of how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam dealt with people. The issue of energizing people, the issue of bringing hearts together, the issue of building teams. Soon after Fatah Makkah, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was going to Taif. The army was going to Taif, the battle of Hunain. And at one place they camped. And in that time, it was time for Salah, and Bilal bin Rabah radiallahu anhu was asked to give the adhan, and Bilal radiallahu anhu was calling the adhan. Now in that army, there were a lot of people who had newly accepted Islam. Just after Fatah Makkah, they had come into Islam. A lot of young Quraysh and a lot of others. These people had no tarbiyah, they had no sohbat of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They were just newly into Islam. So there was a group of young aristocratic youngsters from Quraysh who started making fun of Bilal radiallahu anhu calling the adhan. And there was one of them who was particularly vociferous in his criticism of Bilal radiallahu anhu. Now somebody went and brought this news to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and they said, Ya Rasulullah, they are criticizing Bilal. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, call them. So now these youngsters got very worried and afraid, because they said, now what will happen? Because remember, now this is the army, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is the commander-in-chief, he is the general. And he's calling them. They got very worried. They said, maybe, now it's punishment for us. So when they came, he told them, come close. And he said, which one of you was making fun of Bilal? And that person thought, well, this is my last moment of my life, because now he's going to order someone to chop my head. So he said, Ya Rasulullah, it's me. He said, come close. The man came and sat right in front of him. I'm talking about Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's treatment of people and what he did. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam looked into his eyes and he said, tell me, shall I teach you how to make adhan? Do you want to learn how to make adhan? Now that guy, what is he going to say there? So he said, yes, I want to learn how to make adhan. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told him, Maulana, repeat after me. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salam, Hayya ala salam, Hayya ala al-falah, Hayya ala al-falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. The man repeated after him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, line after line after line. When he finished, the man said to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Ya Rasulullah, Bilal is your muazzin in Medina. Make me your muazzin in Makkah. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, you are my muazzin in Makkah. The Mu'arriqin, the historians write that Allah gave this man a very long life. He lived to be close to 100. And that man, every single day for every salah, he would come into the masjid, into the haram. He would make wudu. He would make tawaf. He would make 2 rakat of salah. And then he would call the azan. Every single salah, until the day he died. The point in gear is to achieve. Set metrics, review performance, reward achievement, and close the cycle. Assess the future challenges. Where do we go from here? Focus on your investment. The question I asked this morning, and let me ask you this question also. How many of you today prayed for the forgiveness of your parents? How many of you today prayed for the forgiveness of your grandparents? My question to you is, what do you think your children will do? If you did not pray for your parents and your grandparents, do you think your children are going to pray for you? So what is the investment that you are making, my brothers and sisters and elders? Think about this. What investment are you making? Because these children, these people who you are feeding and, hopefully nurturing, they are your investment in the akhirah. What is your investment? You cannot even say with certainty that they will pray for you. What else will they do or not do? Ask yourself these questions. These are foundational, very important questions to ask. What is our achievement? Our achievement will not be measured by what we leave behind. Our achievement will be measured by what we send ahead. Our achievement will be measured by what we send ahead. In the leadership course that I teach, on the first day we ask people to make a balance sheet. What will I leave behind? What am I sending ahead? What have I sent ahead? And the question I tell them is that if you drop dead right now, how will this balance sheet look? What have you sent ahead and what have you left behind in this world? What you leave behind in the world, you will be questioned about. What you send ahead of you, you will be rewarded for. The question is, how much do we really believe that? We know the words, but do we really believe it? Because if we really believe it, then this balance sheet of ours must show that. What are those metrics? Make the balance sheet for yourself. Make the balance sheet for yourself and see how it stands. With Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there was constant focus on action. Personal connection with Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala. He created what is known as the first constitution that was ever written for any state. The constitution that he wrote, the agreement that he wrote between him and the people of Medina. Medina was a pluralistic, multicultural, multi-religious society. And that constitution is a beautiful document which talks in terms of equality, which talks in terms of joint responsibility, which talks in terms of mutual concern and compassion for each other, and which is all of which is based on a foundation of justice. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam focused on personal connection with Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala. Abu Musa al-Ashari radiallahu anhu, one of the Sahaba of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, was praying in the masjid. He was doing nafil salah and he was reciting Quran. And he sensed that there was somebody standing behind him, but of course he was in salah. So when he finished his salah, he turned around and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was standing behind him. He said, Ya Rasulullah, you are standing behind here. He said, I was listening to your recitation. Abu Musa al-Ashari radiallahu anhu had a beautiful recitation. Abu Musa said, Ya Rasulullah, if I knew that you were listening to my recitation, I would have beautified it even more. Personal connection with Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala. Creating of processes and systems. Many people, sometimes they are mistaken because they don't read the seerah. So they are mistaken. They say Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not appoint a successor. which is completely false. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam appointed Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu as a successor very clearly. But the problem is we don't understand things, we want things to be done in our way. Which means that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam should have sent an email with Abu Bakr's name in it. Right? Otherwise we won't accept it. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, before he died, for 5-6 days before he died, he made Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu the Imam of Salah. He called Aisha radiallahu anha and he said, call your father, tell him to lead Salah. Aisha radiallahu anha did not like that. She said, Ya Rasulullah. She first ignored, then she said, Ya Rasulullah, his heart is very soft, he will cry. People will not like to see him standing on your musalla. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, do not argue with me. Do not be like the women of Yusuf. Do what I tell you. Tell Abu Bakr to lead Salah. Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu led Salah. After that, for the next Salah or the Salah after that, the Muazzin looked for him, he wasn't there, so he told Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu to lead Salah. Sayyidina Umar was reciting Quran, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam heard him, he had a big voice. He heard him and he said, who told Umar to lead Salah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the people do not want Umar to lead Salah, call Abu Bakr radiallahu anhum. Umar ibn al-Khattab was very angry with him, with the Muazzin. He said, why did you do that? Why did you tell me to lead Salah when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam didn't? He said, well, I told you because you are the next one after Abu Bakr. The Sahaba understood this hierarchy very, very clearly. A woman came to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam and said, asked a question. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, come tomorrow. She said, if tomorrow if I come and you are not here, what do I do? He said, go to Abu Bakr. She said, if he is not there, what do I do? He said, go to Umar radiyallahu anhu ajma'in. And that was the clinching argument when they were discussing who should be the Amir. When Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu stood up and he said, who among you will accept that he should lead Salah and Abu Bakr should be praying behind him? And people said, Ya'adu billah. They said, Na'udhu billah, may Allah protect us from this. And Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu said to Abu Bakr Siddiq, he said, extend your hand and I will give you bayah. And people all gave him bayah. On what basis? That he was the Imam of Salah. For the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajmain, the number one, the most important thing in life was Salah. And their logic was, if somebody is fit to lead us in Salah, then obviously he is fit to lead us in the other unimportant things of the dunya. But we live in the dunya, where the dunya is far more important than the worship of Allah, and therefore we get confused unnecessarily. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam created clearly everything demarcated. The last one is the return to society, sharing the wealth, sharing the knowledge. Think about this. There were close to 125,000 people who prayed the janazah for Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when he passed away, there were that number of Sahaba who were there in Medina. How many are buried in Medina? How many are buried in Makkah? Why didn't the Sahaba take the view that let me become a khadim of the dargah of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam? You know, sit there by his grave and spend the rest of my life there and not move from there? Why didn't they not take that view? Because they understood the meaning of the message. They understood the meaning of the message. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, 97 years old. The army is going to fight in Europe. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari comes out and he says, I am going with the army. His sons, people are saying, why must you go? You have taken part in every battle with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You are ill, you are 97 years old. He said, did you not hear what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said? He said, what did Allah say? He said, Allah said, infiru khifafan wa thiqala. Allah said, go. Whether you are light or heavy, whether you are strong or weak, whether you are rich or poor, whether you are go in the path of Allah, infiru. Go in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They proceeded a few days into the journey. Obviously, it's a very hard journey. He realized that he is going to die. He called his sons and he said, my wasiyah to you is that if I die, I should not be buried where I die. You must carry my body to the last point that this army goes to and bury me there. So they said, this is a strange kind of wasiyat you are giving us. I mean, why should we carry your dead body all the way. He said, because on the day of judgment I want to say to my Rabb that, Ya Rabb, when I was alive, I went in your path, and when I died, my body also went in your path. And Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu is buried in Constantinople, he is buried in Istanbul. They understood the message. They understood the meaning of the message. And they understood that no matter how hard it is to leave Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhu, one of the favorite Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, very, very handsome young man. They used to say that Mu'adh was one of the most good-looking young men in Medina. Al-Ansari, Katib-e Wahi, a person who was under the personal tutelage of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is sending him to Yemen as the governor and Qadi of Yemen. He teaches him. He has taught him. Now is the test. He asks him, how will you judge? Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhu says, Ya Rasulullah, I will judge by the book of Allah. He said, and if you do not find the answer there, what will you do? He said, I will look in your Sunnah. And he said, if you do not find the answer there, what will you do? He said, I will consult with people of knowledge. And he said, if you don't find the answer there, what will you do? He said, then I will use my intelligence and my qiyas. Kitabullah wa sunnatullah wa ijma' wa qiyas. The basic principles of jurisprudence that we follow to this day, that is what was taught. And then Mu'adh bin Jabal is mounted on his horse. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is holding the bridle of the horse and he is walking. He is sending one of his favorite students on a journey. And as he is walking, he says, Mu'adh, when you come back, you may not find me here and you might pass by my grave. Mu'adh bin Jabal started weeping. He got off his horse. He said, Ya Rasulullah, what are you saying? He said, you will not be here when I come back. I will pass by your grave. But did Mu'adh bin Jabal not go? He went. He went. The fact that he was seeing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the last time did not stop him from going. He did not say, Ya Rasulullah, let me stay here and when you have passed away, then I will go. No. No. The role, the goal, the vision, the principle comes above everything else. Everything else is subservient to that. Everything else subservient to that. And that was the return to society. The letters he sent to the different kings. The Da'watul Islam, distribution of zakat. The actual Baitul Mal was started by Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. In the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was no formal Baitul Mal, but there was formal collection of zakat and distribution of zakat. And of course, as I explained to you, the issue of khilafah, of perpetuating the leadership, the return to society. My brothers and sisters, we live in a strange paradox that we are a people whose religion is based on a book. The first word revealed was Iqra. Yet we are the people who read the least. We publish the least. The least number of books are published from Muslim countries. Muslims are the people who do not read. We are afraid of knowledge. We don't want to learn. We are afraid of science and technology. We don't want to learn. We are afraid even of religious knowledge. Tell me which Sunni, Hanafi, Madrasa or Darul Ulum will invite a Shafi'i scholar to come and teach an entire course. I'm not talking about calling him for Khatme Bukhari and then tying turbans on people's heads. I'm talking about calling a Shafi'i scholar to come and teach a course in a Sunni Hanafi madrasa. Which madrasa will do it? Vice versa. Though if the Shafi'is are feeling good, let me make them feel bad also. Which Shafi'i madrasa will invite a Sunni alim, a Sunni Hanafi alim to come and teach a course in a Shafi'i madrasa on fiqh? Why are we afraid? We are afraid of our own scholars. Forget about anybody else. We are afraid of our own scholars. We are afraid of knowledge. We are afraid of understanding. We are afraid of learning. We are allergic to learning. We are allergic to books. A friend tells me, he tells me, Sheikh, that if I just read after 2 pages, I go to sleep. I said, mashallah, very nice. I told him, grow your hair and tie a rope to your hair and tie it to the ceiling. So when you sleep, it jerks and wakes you up. And the worst thing is that we do not even understand our own book. We do not even understand the Quran and we are completely unashamed about it. Completely unashamed. We read, we make hifz, we learn tajweed, we learn qiraatul Quran, and then we sing a tune. Because the one reciting has no clue what he's saying. He's singing a tune. And the ones listening are listening to a tune. And he say, mashallah, mashallah, what a beautiful qiraat. I say, that's right, but what did he say? I have no clue. What is this? I mean, how can we live like this? How can we live like this? If we get, you're all business people here, you are all corporate people here. If you get a letter from a corporation, from a European corporation which is written in German, and that letter comes personally to you, and you don't know German, will you sleep that night? You will go and find somebody somewhere who knows German and translate this thing for me. What are these people saying? I want to know. Maybe there is this huge, humongous deal that I've got where I can make a huge amount of money. You will not sleep the whole night because you got a letter which you don't understand. And you and I sleep very peacefully when we have got a whole book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which we don't understand. We make no effort to learn it. We make no effort to understand it. How can we live like this? Please wake up. Stop teaching and learning the Quran like this. Learn the Quran, understand the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a live kalam, it's not a dead mantra to be recited for sawab. It's a live conversation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking a question. We have to answer Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are we going to say? Please think about that. Think about this. Last two slides. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, Alam naj'alil arda mihada wal jibala awtada. Allah said, we created the mountains as pegs. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَسُيِّرَتِ الْجِبَالِ فَكَانَتْ سَرَابًا. And the mountain will be moved away from their places as if it was a mirage. It will become, it's like a mirage. You thought you saw it. My question is this. We read the ayah and we read the translation. The mountains as pegs. But did we ask why pegs? Did we ask this question? Why pegs? What if we had asked this question and discovered the answer and told it to the rest of the world? Tell me. Today if I ask you why pegs, you will tell me. Because it anchors the tectonic plates. Isostacy of mountains. You will tell me all of this. My question to you is, who discovered that knowledge? Where did you get it from? And that is the point I am making. We received the information first, but somebody else found the answers on their own with no help from us. How can we live like this? We go into companies, we work in corporations. What does the company know about Islam? Because I am working in that company. What does the company know about Islam by looking at me? What does the company know about Islam by dealing with me? What does the company know about Islam in the way that Islam is treated? You know and I know that this country, there was a time during the apartheid regime that the Muslim was not, it was not necessary, the Muslim was not compelled to swear on the Quran or any other book in a court of law, because they said Muslims don't lie, so they don't have to swear that they will speak the truth. This same country, this was your law. What happened to it? Others said it. The Muslims never ruled this country. People ruling the country were Christian people. And the Christian people made their own Christians swear on the Bible to speak the truth, but the Muslim was not compelled to swear on the Bible or the Quran or anything, because they said Muslims don't lie. So if a Muslim comes and bears witness in court, we accept the man's word, no problem. But a Christian government, a Christian court said the Christian has to swear on the Bible. Can you imagine this thing? This, your own country, this happened. There was a time when this happened. What happened to it? Where did it go? Why did it go? Who is responsible? My brothers and sisters, we were not sent to grub in the soil like chickens searching for worms. We were sent to change the world. And the world is waiting for us to do our job. Jazakumullahu khairan wa salamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Those are my websites and email ID and so on. Do take a look at that, visit them, email me. I always try to answer all my mails. And most welcome to ask any questions and so on and so forth as you like. Jazakumullahu khairan.